guys, it's Shaman. Welcome to my channel. I just want to quickly thank everyone who watched my first video. There was so much positive feedback. So in general, thank you for being awesome. So this video is about how I got straight A's my entire life and the process I used to do that. Let's get right into it. So you know that syllabus you get at the beginning of class that people just throw away? Well, you want to hang on to that syllabus because it's really important for the next steps. So I think the best way for me to demonstrate how I prepare and study for each class is to go through an example. And you can modify that example a little bit for each class you take. So what you are looking at right now is an endocrinology class syllabus. I just cropped out the title right here. So on the first page we just have the lecture topics. You can just glance over them, it's not too important. The second half has the important information. I just cropped the top half, which has room numbers and just other stuff. The bottom half has a lot of important information, so let's just read it. There will be 2 1.5-hour lectures per week, plus 1 hour discussion section per week. Discussion section will review papers from the primary literature. These papers will be assigned each week and available on, which is just a website my college used. Discussion is required and a portion of test questions, 10%, will come from discussion section and outside readings. You will not likely do well if you do not attend discussion. There will be 3 midterms and a final. So the first thing you should take note of is that discussion seems to be an important part of this class. So in a lot of different discussion sections, it's basically you just reviewing material you learned at lecture. So people usually just loaf around, they don't pay too much attention because it's not that important. But in this class, it seems to be. So even if it's 10%, it's still new material coming from discussion. So you want to take detailed notes in that discussion section. Endocrinology by Mac Hadley is recommended. This text is for reference only. Test material will come from lecture and discussion section, not the text. Use the text to look up terms, review pictures and diagrams, clarify points. So essentially, it's spelled out for you in this syllabus. In many other classes, they'll recommend a textbook, but you directly want to ask your professor or teacher this question. Will textbook material that is not on the lecture appear on the exam? So from that syllabus, we gathered which resources were important to get an A on the exam. So from this syllabus, we can see that the most important resource are those lecture notes you'll take during each lecture. The second most important will be the discussion notes that make up 10% of the exams. The third optional resource is the textbook, which you can use if you're having confusion with lecture or discussion section. Personally, in this situation where the textbook is optional, I wouldn't read the textbook because I would rather get my questions answered by directly asking the teacher or by looking it up myself. Finding the answers that way helps me personally better understand the material, and it also saves some money. This might seem like very few resources, but this is exactly what you want if you want to get an A in the class. You want to focus on the material that will be on the exam. So this is how I would pick the resources for this class, and you want to modify that a little bit depending on which class you're taking. So if you're taking a biology class where in the syllabus it says there's a required manual, you also want to add that manual to the list of resources. So now that we have our few important resources, how do we effectively use those resources? So one of the most common mistakes is that you don't review these resources as you go along in your class. So you might have these notes that you wait until a week before your exam before you actually start reading them. A very easy way to keep up with your notes as you go along with the class is to rewrite the notes you take after lecture. So you want to take notes during your lecture, and after your lecture you want to come home and rewrite those notes. That's because if you rewrite your notes, they'll be more organized because you better understand the scope of the lecture and what your teacher was trying to teach. And they'll also be cleaner and easier to read because you're not rushing. You also want to remove unnecessary details from your notes that you know will not be on the exam. And the reason that I found it's much more helpful to review notes as you go along is because you're not only able to better memorize the material, the most important thing is that you're better able to apply that information, which is what's needed on many difficult exams. So rewriting your notes counts as one pass, and you want to have 3 passes done over your notes before the exam. So a week before the exam, you want to reread the notes 2 to 3 times. And here's the most important tip. After your exam, you want to review your exam and see how your studying strategy matched up with what was on the exam. Were your notes not detailed enough and you were taking out too much information? Or were your notes too detailed and you were adding so much information and getting bogged down by it? Maybe there are questions from a resource you didn't study. For example, there might have been questions from a book recommended in the syllabus, but not required. So you want to take all this information and modify your studying so it better matches what's on the exam. If you were lucky enough to have a mock exam or a practice exam before your first exam, you want to follow these same tips, except with that practice exam. So when you're reviewing your exam, you don't want to just look at the questions you got wrong. You want to look at all of the questions in the exam, whether they were easy or hard, and you want to see exactly how your teacher is constructing that test. Is he taking things all directly from the lecture material? Is he maybe taking lecture material concepts and making you apply them? You want to get into the test maker's head and see how that exam was made so you can better understand how to properly study for it. And here's a bonus tip that applies only to college students, but it is so important that I think I should add it to this video. So you might say, Shaman, I understand all your tips and everything, but I have an insane class. You don't understand, this teacher literally gives out 3 A's. He's insane. And you're right, he's insane. And you can't get an A in that class. Seriously. So the trick here is to not take that class. So in order to not take classes like that are impossibly hard, you want to first have a look at all of your teachers for the next semester. And after you find out their names, you want to look them up on databases like Rate My Professor, Ninja Courses, or whatever other databases or sites your school uses. This way, if you find out your professor has like a 1.5 out of 5 on Rate My Professor, you can avoid taking that crazy class. So if it's a requirement, maybe you can take it the next semester. If you're taking it in the fall, you can take it in the spring, because instructors usually change between the 2 terms. If it's just an elective and it's not required, then I would recommend either waiting or choose a different elective. Okay, so those are the most important tips that I have to get straight A's. And if you follow this sort of process, you will definitely be better prepared for each and every one of your classes. Not only is this a really efficient way to study, but it's also a simple way to study that prevents you from getting stressed out or overwhelmed by too many resources or not being sure of what to do. Keeping things simple and efficient is the best way to succeed at school. I hope this video helped. It applies to basically everyone. My next video will be specific to the MCAT for everyone asking, and I will see you in my next video.